Hey guys, this is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings NBA video for Tuesday, January 19th. There's only a small 4-game slate that we have. 3 of the 4 games do have totals over 200. There are some spreads that are, a little bit high. There is one game, the Miami-Milwaukee game, where the total's a little bit lower than the other ones. But I do think that just about every one of these games has a couple guys that are in play. There are 3 guys who I really like and are pretty much the beginning of the backbone for most of my cash and GPP rosters today. And I wanted to give you guys those names so, you have some guys to look at when you start building your rosters tonight as well. So let's call up the slideshow and talk about who we really like. The 3 guys that I have on my radar right now are Russell Westbrook at 10,700, Markieff Morris at 4,800, and Tyler Johnson at 5,100. Now, you guys know I'm a big fan of paying up for some of the studs on these small slates. I don't think you can make up for not having a Russell Westbrook if he, goes off and has a 50, 60-point game. Yes, he is expensive, but there is enough value on the slate that there are ways to fit him in. And that's why I decided to start with him and then give you 2 of the value guys that I'm going to be using in order to make him fit. He's in the highest total game on the day at 212, favored by 8, and is playing a very bad Denver defensive team. Not only is Denver bad on defense, but they've had particular trouble stopping point guards. So I think Russell Westbrook is definitely in a good spot here. He's coming off 2 easy victories where he only averaged about 30 minutes. He played, both of those games that they won pretty easy. They didn't need him to do a ton. He only played about 30 minutes, and he still walked away with triple doubles in both of those games. His assist numbers are really up lately. He's getting his teammates involved a little more, mostly because they haven't really needed him to do everything. For me, he's the best option to pay up for. You have Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, and Paul George as the other 3 options today that you can decide to put your money into. I like KD a lot in cash games. He's a safe 45 to 55 fantasy points, but he doesn't really have a ton of upside. I made a New Year's resolution not to play Anthony Davis, so I'm not putting Brown in my cash game lineups or in most of my GPP lineups, although I may have some exposure if I try to go a different way. And Paul George really hasn't been playing as well as we would have hoped, or as we saw him playing earlier in the year. So for me, that basically just leaves Westbrook as the guy who I think is the best to pay up for. Like I said, on short slates like this, I think stars and scrubs is one of the ways to go. So Westbrook is definitely going to be one of the stars in my lineup, and then I'm going to see if I can fit one of these other 3 guys in there with him as well, depending on how the value opens up on the rest of the slate. The second guy I want to talk about is Tyler Johnson at 5,100. Johnson's likely to get another start with Bino Udrih and Goran Dragic both out. Both of those guys are hurt, and Johnson, who's really listed as a shooting guard, will probably get moved over and be the point guard here. He is still listed as a shooting guard on DraftKings, and whatever other sites you play on, make sure you take a look, because some places they have him as a point guard, some places they have him as a shooting guard, but just about everywhere they have him pretty cheap, especially for especially for the level of production and the number of minutes he should be playing today. Played 38 minutes in the last game as a starter, and in the last 4 games, he's seen 27 to 38 minutes and produced between 20 and 30 fantasy points, which would put him on pace for 5 or 6x at the price of 5,100 that he's sitting at today. He's averaging about 13 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists over his recent stretch, and I think he's probably an easy, safe 5x value guy today that does have the upside to get you 6x or better, depending on how that game flow goes, especially if both of those guys are still out. The last guy we're going to talk about is Markieff Morris, who's only 4,800. Finally out of the doghouse in Cleveland and back into the rotation. Played 22 to 33 minutes in the last 3 games since being inserted back into the starting lineup or back into the rotation. He's gone 7x value, 6x value, and 7x value in those 3 games. About 30 fantasy points each time. He's averaging 27 minutes since he's been reinserted, 14 points, 6.5 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.5 steals. So, right there, you're looking at 14 fantasy points, another probably about 8 for the rebounds, another 4.5 for the assists, another 3 for the steals. So you're looking at about 29, 30 fantasy points right there, which would put him at 6x value at a price of 4,800. I think he's still way too cheap. The fact that he wasn't in the starting lineup or he wasn't producing for us, basically had more to do with the beef that he was having with the coach than it does with his talent. When this guy's in the lineup, he was a borderline all-star last year. And earlier this year, he was putting up some pretty solid numbers where his price was closer to 6K. So if you can get him at below 5K right now and he's getting back to, the guy that we knew him as last year in the beginning of this year, I think you're still getting a really good deal out there on Markieff Morris. So those are three guys that I'm going to be building my lineups around. I really like the two cheap plays. Like I said, I've decided that Russell Westbrook is the guy I want to pay up for. If you have a different decision, the two cheap plays are still guys that should be in everyone's lineups. If you decide you like Brow better or KD, if you're playing in cash because he's safer, I'm not going to give you any arguments on that. But, for me, for my tournament and cash game rosters, I started them with Westbrook, put these two guys in, and then, built around it with a little bit of value and a couple of the other, stars on the day. So thank you guys for joining us here for our NBA video for Tuesday, January 19th over at rotocurve.com. I'm Benny Ricciardi, and as always, stay classy, DFS.